Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, James Cronk.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another Golf Industry Guru podcast, and I am thrilled to have a return engagement with Mr. Gregg Patterson. Gregg, obviously, with Club Manager Extraordinaire, travels the world speaking to golf clubs and managers all over the place, Asia, Europe, United States, 34 years as a general manager at the Beach Club, now Tribal Magic, kind of the guru of bringing the buzz, the love, and the glow to staff and to members. Gregg, it's just a thrill to have you here. You know, I was noticing the other day when I was looking at my notes, how do you get Lifetime Achievement Awards when you're still so young, for goodness sake?
Well, when you're 70 years old, I guess you're not young anymore. It depends on how you define that sort of thing. You know what it is, James? I've been around a long time. Well, it's interesting when you talk about that because I'm in the third stage of life right now, and everybody should look at it. First, you learn, college school. Second, you're in your job. And the third, you reflect on what you've done and you enlarge and enrich the experience. And so I'm blessed to be in that third stage now, which is as exciting as the first two. And I'm writing a lot and talking a lot and brooding on life's great adventure a lot. So it's a good journey.
Well, I thought you would add when you were talking about the learning and then the doing, and then in the third phase, and this likely may be what you meant is obviously it also means sharing and educating and mentoring and distilling and giving out that wisdom.
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting. By doing it for yourself, to arrive at a deeper understanding of business and people and situations, as we're doing, the giving it back is what amplifies it for you. You see, it's like a repeat thing. So I like to call it disgorging. So you disgorge your insights, and all of a sudden you get more insights. So people always ask me, "Oh, Greg, you give away all your stuff," and I say, "Great," because that opens up a space in my brain for something new. So that's what we're doing now. So anytime I talk to you, I'm happy to give you anything because I've already started to think up the next thing.
Well, it's interesting, and thank you so much, first of all, and on behalf of our members of Golf Industry Guru, thank you very much. And I would say that is the one thing that has been so consistent as Scott and I have had this journey of Golf Industry Guru, is that when we've reached out to mentors and peers like yourself and others from around the world that have expertise in their different areas, the generosity and the willingness to share, the willingness to republish materials or to do podcasts or to do courses has just been so consistent. And I think it's a trait. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today a little bit with regards to people and with regards to the business that we're in. We are in such a fascinating industry that you really need to love, I think, to enjoy it and to be in it for the many years that, you have been and I have been. And it takes a certain kind of personality to be able to kind of navigate, I think, the clubdom world and giving and sharing and being empathetic, I think, is a key trait that I come across a lot when I come across managers that I have a great deal of admiration for.
Well, let me give you an example, or just a model I like to use, and I love to tell people that there are only 10% of the people in the world should be in hospitality, that genuinely like people, that want to do good things for other people, that want to help in whatever they can to give their joy. 10% should be in hospitality. And we've all met waiters that aren't part of that 10%.
Yes.
But clubs are about long-term relationships. Hotels, front desk is a 10-minute relationship. A waiter might be a 2-hour relationship. If you're in clubs, it's a 50-year relationship. So the ultimate expression of hospitality is clubdom. And only 10% of the people in hospitality should be in clubs. We are the true 1%ers. And that's why it's very difficult. And for me, the joy was, it's good to be king, I like to say, that you ultimately hire and cull out those people that don't have that 1%er quality. And then you keep those people, you embrace them, you keep them happy for a long time. And all of a sudden you find that you have an incredible organization that's hugely successful. I mean, it's basic, but you have to be one of the 1%ers, and you have to find the 1%ers.
Yeah, that's 100%. And we're going to actually talk about that when we get a chance to do a course with you called, is it Long Time Staff Happy?
Long time, big time staff happy. Yeah. And the first thing is managers have to have a template of what is a good employee. Skills you can teach, but do they have the people qualities that will make them a 1%er? They don't have to express it yet, but do they have the potential to be a 1%er?
Well, unfortunately, today, what we're going to talk about is when we don't have a choice to find the 1%ers, because when we're dealing with members and we're dealing with boards and presidents and finance committees or aquatics committees or greens committees, we don't always get, we certainly don't get to hire and fire them. Not that we don't wish that we could sometimes, but when I was in the restaurant business before the golf business, people used to ask me the difference. I said, the difference is that when someone has a bad experience in the restaurant and they call you over to the table and they tell you that they were unhappy and they're never coming back, that's a lost customer, and you try to overcome it and keep them. When that happens at a club, they're coming back tomorrow and the next day and the next week and the next year. There's no leaving. They're there forever. So you really have to find a way to manage the people and the member. And so what we want to talk about, or what I would love to get some of your insight on today, Gregg, is we talked about, governance and guiding governance. And here we are, we've come through 7 or 8 months now of some time with regards to pandemic in the world, et cetera, et cetera. Who knows when someone's listening to this podcast about where the state of the world is at, but things don't change. And we always have to have bosses, whether we have an owner operator as a boss, or we have a board and a president that might change every couple of years as a boss. But as club managers, we've got to find a way to govern and to use good governance. And share with our listeners, if you don't mind, about what lessons you think are critical right now with creating good governance at your club, or even adapting good governance at your club.
Oh, it's huge. Governance is the key thing. If you're going to examine a culture, whether it be the American culture, whether it be your club culture, governance is job one, because governance is about who makes the decisions, who executes the decisions, and who makes sure that those decisions are enforced. 3 levels of governance. So when you talk about governance, I mean, what we're talking about now is the policy making side of the governance thing. The administration side is the manager's responsibility. And we can talk about that and how do you manage. The problem is they get confused. And one of the things I'd say, if you want to have a happy governance process, is accept under the first thing governance. I want to, as manager, get insight and input from the board about administration, but then the board needs to be receptive to my giving them insight and advice about policy. So there has to be, it's a two-way street. I love it when managers say, they jump into micromanaging. First of all, if there's a hole you've left, that's fine. But I say, I want them to give me insight and input, but I make the decision. I want a board that's receptive to my insight and input before they make a policy decision. It's a two-way street. So when I hear this, people, managers manage and no, dude, they're interfacing. Now the final decision, policy-wise, is made by the board. The final decision is made by the manager. But what we can talk about right now when it comes to governance, and governance is the first thing at any club. And the thing that's most often screwed up in a screwed up club is screwed up governance right off the bat, because everything in a culture follows from governance. Somebody's making the decision on what the why is and whatever it might be. But when I talk about, if you're a manager, what can you do? There are like 3 stages of the governance process that you have to influence. 1, getting the right people into the governance process and educating them into the governance model. And how do you go about doing that? Then selecting them to actually govern. Because the first step is really a committee process. That's where people learn governance, club governance, right? The mistake is a lot of clubs go right to step 2 before step 1. They put people on the board, which is the board of directors or the committee, whatever you want to call it, is step 2. They're the actual policy makers. First step is you're insulated from the dogs because they can only advise. Second step is that they are on the board because they've already gone through the governance process. And I'll tell you how to do that in a second. But then the third step that people neglect is once they've been in governance, you've got to maintain the relationship because those are your trumpets and your ears. People who have been on the board, like ours, we had 9 members, 3 leave every year. After they've gone, you have a governance responsibility as manager to influence the way they see the situation because they are your trumpet because you've developed a relationship with them. They can say, oh, Gregg told me this the other day, and they'll trumpet it to members. And the next thing is they are ears. Gregg, we love you, baby, but they don't like the soup. This potato soup is cold. Dude, it's vichyssoise. Anyway, yeah. No, but you understand. So there are 3 phases of governance. And my job as manager, as a professional activist manager, if you want to be a professional secretary, I'm happy for you. But you're not going to get the big bucks and you're not going to stay a long time. What you want is a professional manager who can influence those 3 stages. Now, I always talk about nudging governance, guiding governance. Understand this is the manager's role, and this is an activist, and people will disagree with this. My job is to influence those who make decisions, to make decisions consistent with my vision of the good. I am the professional. They pay me for that, and I have to have a skill set such that I can convince them that my vision is the right vision. And you're not trying to implant on the club that which isn't there. You have to know the DNA of the club, but that's neither here. That's another topic altogether. But if you know the DNA and you know the club environment, that's the macro environment, and you know the micro environment, your club's environment, my job is to align those so that you can move smoothly into the future.
If you were a club manager and he or she was arriving at a new club, for example, or you were trying to take your current club that has poor governance into a better world of governance, what would be some of the steps that you think that you should try to kind of take the board through, take the executive through, take the president through?
The first thing is you've got to generate a governance manual. No manager should enter a club where they don't have a manual. Like, how do we govern at this club? And absolutely fundamental. Now, you can go in. The manager should not go in and say, oh, what do you think? They should go in and say, this is my vision of the good. Let's talk, because adjustment is part of what it is. Well, Gregg, we really like our president to say 2 years. Well, okay, we can make it work if we do this, right? How do we adjust that? So my job, and that's what I call the template, right? That governance manual, you should have a template of a standard governance manual that asks all the questions. Understand, you ask all the questions. How frequently how many standing committees should there be? What subcommittees should there be? Those are specific questions in your governance manual. How do you get on a committee? How do you get on the board of directors? What is the relationship of past presidents to the board of directors? These are exciting questions. So every manager should generate their own manual, and the manual is based on questions. I'm big on questions, as you can, you've sat with me, If I ask you, if I come in as a consultant, and this is not what I do, I come in, I talk to people. I'm a talker, I'm a speaker. But if I come in and say, this is the template, let me ask you some questions. Can you be on the board of directors before you've served on a committee? Oh, yes. Well, dude, we got to change that.
Yeah, exactly.
What sort of orientation do you provide to committees? Boom. What orientation? How is that distinct from the orientation you provide to the board of directors? Right? Boom. So somebody can say, well, what are you talking about, dude? I said, you don't have a governance manual then, because these are questions that I would ask if I was a new president. I say, okay, I want to know these things, right? My job as manager is to do my research, and we've got a whole I could talk forever about creativity. Where do you find ideas? What is the process that you use to generate ideas? Your job as manager is to be the mentor to the board. That mentor is responsible for asking the questions that will guide them in the right direction. Now, one of the managers at the Beach Club that followed me, and again, they didn't last very long, is they go and they try to tell the board what to do. And I said, no, dude, you know what they should do. Ask questions that will guide them to the conclusion you want. Oh, I'm the manager. I tell them what to do. I said, dude, you're the mentor of the board. You ask the questions that guide them where you want to take them.
Right. How does a manager that, and that's a skill set, as you know, that's a skill set that you need to learn over time. I always find that some of the best managers I've ever come across, they truly embrace the concept of servitude. They truly embrace the concept of their role as a leader. But at the same point in time, their job as a leader is to bring people along with them. It's to grow the flock. It's not to dictate. I always say I would never last as a general manager of a private club, Greg, because I'd tell someone to get lost in the first 24 hours. I don't have the right personality to do that.
And I think you hit on a very good point, James. It's absolutely critical that you're able to nudge people in the right direction, to influence them in the right direction. And sometimes you nudge them. I tried to get a swimming pool complex at the club. Now, we're right on the coast for 34 years, and I failed. But I kept nudging, right? Nobody got offended by it. But I'd always try to introduce, and I said, at some point there will be a generation that will say, yes, we need to put $3.5 million into a pool complex because it's good for the club and the vision of it, whatever it might be. So you cannot come in and bulldoze. And a lot of managers, and I have to tell you that the manager we have now is a woman, and she's brilliant. And actually, she was a student of mine. Her first job at a club was at mine. And she's been a superstar clubhouse manager at two of the most prestigious clubs in the West Coast. Awesome. She's fabulous. But she's willing to ask questions and listen. It's like me with the board. I'm not going to come in and tell the manager, you should do this. I said, in your business, do you tend to write a lot of memos so that you give people background before you make a decision? Or do you simply write the decision that you've made? There are specific things like my governance model. I ought to give you the front page anyway. Like ethics. If you're not willing, ethics, basically, if you're not willing to put your decision on the front page of the newsletter before, during, and after the decision, don't do it.
Yes. So true. So true.
That's a complicated thing. No, it's not. But if you have a board when I was first there, they said, Greg, don't tell anybody what we're doing. I said, dude, I write the newsletter and it comes out every week. So no, and it's true. So anyway, but because of that, I can support it. Anyway.
So from a general manager that is going through that kind of process of helping their board move along, one of the things we talk about, and you and I've had these conversations before about the misuse of strategic plans and the misuse of mission, vision, and value statements and all that stuff. But in addition to a governance manual, what other tools would a general manager ensure that board has? We talk about onboarding, we talk about your template, we talk about your goals and objectives, but what are some of the tools that a general manager want to make sure that board has?
These are tools a manager must master. I'll tell you right now, and these are I'll give you the written tools first. First of all, the ability to write white papers, which are background reports on giving all the facts and the ideas and the issues on whatever topic it is. If I can write, and I'm a master of white papers. Again, I was a history major. British imperial history was my background. And I read hundreds of white papers, on diplomatic white papers and one thing and next. And all they were doing is giving background information. Before you make the decision, dude, keep this in mind. My job is to be the researcher of choice for the board of directors of the committees. The white paper is fundamental and critical. Next thing is the manager, and again, if anybody wants this, I got a workbook. It's 100 pages giving you examples of everything. I mean, it's just free. I'll just give it away. But
we're actually putting all that on Golf Industry Guru and charging a lot of money for it, Greg. So don't give away the farm.
Cash is king, baby. I salute you. But the next thing that you've got to be able to do is a weekly board update, I call it. And for me, I broke the board update down into every standing and every ad hoc committee. And every week I gave them critical issues there. Now, if there was nothing, then I wouldn't address that thing. But the weekly board update is nudging them, because whenever you write something, keep this in mind. No writing is neutral, James. right? Everything I've written, and I've written a lot of stuff, as you know, believe me, there's no neutral in there. You might say, oh, I'm just going to give you the facts, dude. I'm going to give you the facts and the way of seeing those facts, right?
Yes.
So I hear people say, oh, I just give them the facts. I said, dude, that ain't what you're doing. You may give them all the same facts, but you and I can interpret them differently. So the weekly board, the next thing is, both for committees and boards, I like to do the annotated agendas. These are fabulous. Now, I sit down with the chairman of the committee or the president of the club and say, oh, what are the issues coming up? And they say, oh, we've got to talk about the swimming pool complex or whatever it might be. I say, great. It goes on the thing. Now, they don't, and we talk about it. But my job is to write on the agenda, swimming pool complex. And then I write beneath it the paragraph giving the board the background on that swimming pool. So whatever issue is on the agenda, there's at least one paragraph of explanatory information. Who does that come from? Me, right? So again, you be as objective as possible, but there's always going to be a slant on it, right? You might say cost of sales, finance committee. Cost of sales is 40% or whatever you want to call it. Now, some people will say if you're in a hotel, that's real high. And if you're in some clubs, that's real low. So you say, this is the paragraph, this is philosophically consistent with where we are as a club, da-da-da. So you notice what I've done. I've written all this stuff already. Boom. And before you do that, that means once a month you meet with every committee chairman because you're going over the agenda. With the president, this is my standard because the president is a trumpet for in the ears of the manager. We meet for at least an hour every week. And if you've had a meeting with me, as you have, James, it never lasts only an hour, right? Because you want to get them excited, not just about club stuff, but about life. I want them to know me. I want to know them because we have a relationship. One of the key things to success of leadership is being able to create relationships and not to antagonize people, the bulldozer thing. Then writing the minutes. I'm just telling you a sequence of things going on.
I love it. It's awesome.
Both at the committee level and the board level is writing up the minutes. Now, believe me, minutes aren't neutral. And I did action minutes, so I know a lot of stuff. But there is he who writes controls the message. Because I can say something to you right now, and within 2 days, I ask somebody what I said to James, and it'll be completely different than what I said. Writing is the permanent message that you're delivering and can be circulated to everybody, can be published or whatever it might be. So then I used to do a weekly club update. We called it the Skinny because originally I used to write a monthly newsletter and it was big. And then I wrote the Skinny because it was small, but then the Skinny became big because I like to write, right? But so the members are brought along. So obviously members talk to members and members on committees and the board. It influences, you see the two-way influence going on? So that sort of thing. So you're always communicating, and if I'm the manager and you're trying to, but it comes back to, you know what you're talking about? Do you love what you're talking about? And can you articulate what you're talking about? So then the next thing is the ability to speaking. First of all, you talk about writing and speaking. So the ability to speak effectively is critical. Like my finance committee, and I use this as an example. I sit in there. These guys are all Harvard educated, right? They're very bright people. And all they're doing is they're sitting there and looking at you and listening. They're not looking at paper. If they're looking at paper, you failed. Tell you right off the bat, you failed, right? If they're looking at that paper and trying to read numbers, I said, let me tell you what's going on, because they want to hear the philosophy embedded in the numbers. And then the numbers are a reflection of the philosophy, or the numbers didn't reflect our philosophy. And why is that? Let's make a correction. You see, so the next thing I would say, and one of the critical things is what I call the annotate. I like to do annotations. I call it finance variance analysis. The variance, and my variances were $1,000, less than 1,000. I ignored it. More than 1,000 or more. And so my committee, and understand what I'm doing with the finance committee now. People think, oh yeah, I always give them the financial statements. Yes. But what do they read? They read the annotation. They read, I call it the variance analysis. And again, I got examples of this. Anybody wants this stuff, or through you, whatever you want to do. But the fact of the matter is, I want to put in terms that anybody can understand, because all the committees get this. My senior staff get this. The senior staff have to talk about it with the regular staff. So again, you're spreading the message. My board gets this. So a lot of people know what it is. So in reading a financial statement, my job is to articulate. And if I write it first, believe me, I can talk about it, because ain't nobody has the knowledge and the love that I have and the ability to articulate. So you're not trying to bulldoze people, but you anticipate their comments. They say, Greg, I run the McDonald's down the street and it's only 21% cost of sales. I said, great. But that's why the members don't eat there. They are paying dues for a different value equation than you provided. And all my committee, they get all this thing. And again, one of the things I emphasize is every committee has to understand the value equation. V equals E minus C. Value equals experience minus cost, right? So how much will they pay to come to the 4th of July celebration? Well, what sort of experience are they delivering? Because my members got money. They drive down in Ferraris, right? A Porsche is a poor man's Ferrari is what they call it. Not to me, but to them it is. I ride a bicycle to work, so different world. But understand, they've got the money. They just choose not to put it into the club. And in England, they can't raise dues. They say, the subscriptions are so high. I said, dude, you're not giving enough value. Because I want to go out in the parking lot and see how many people have 20-year-old cars out there. Oh, nobody does, Greg, right? Well, if they got money for new car, they got money for your dues. Anyway, so
for every McDonald's, there's also a Ruth Chris, or there's a different kind of experience. I mean, it's all what it is. What I would love what you just said there a minute ago, and I kind of wrote this down. Is like, to write is to inform, but to speak is to convince.
Absolutely.
And I would say that that's the one thing that I find in my travels is that, and I would agree with you. Writing is our clubs, we have to distill rumor, and diminish rumor and kind of, make sure that a rumor doesn't become a truth, a fact. My goodness, we're talking about facts in the world these days and about what's facts, what's real and what's not real. But, like you said, financial statements, writing, details, explanations, when you put it in paper, it's going to be there for everyone to look at, for everyone to judge, for everyone to assess. You got to stand behind it, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very, very valuable skill.
Right. Well, when you come back to that, I like what you're saying, because there are really two things. The speaking is emotion. Right?
Emotion.
Can we get people emotionally engaged? And emotion makes you receptive to the message. So the second part is what I call analysis. Writing is the analysis that supports the emotion. So people who just have emotion and no analysis, it kind of is vapor. People who have analysis and no emotion, it doesn't. Because one of the comments that I make when it comes to educating people, before you can educate, you must engage the mind. But before you can engage the mind, you must entertain. So the emotional side opens them up, makes them the sponge. Like, I'm ready, dude. You got me excited. The analysis is what fills that sponge. That's critical. So absolutely. So those are skill sets that a manager must have. The speaking skills. And again, I've got workbooks on public speaking for club managers. Now, public speaking is just talking to somebody in a public space. And the second one is writing for club managers. So all this stuff is in there. They have to master these two things if they're going to nudge the organization.
And what I love about what you're talking about as well is that when we're sitting around at club manager conferences, it's not unusual, to have 6 or 7 men and women at a table and, to share our war stories about the challenges of our board or the challenge of this committee, or, everyone wanting to talk about, the quality of the French fries or the speed of the greens. And I would, in my experience, I think the managers that are successfully navigating those types of clubs, they do it through transparency. They do it through communication. They do it through facts. They do it through process. Like, at the end of the day, you have to believe that that those members that get the value, that understand the equation, that really they don't want to. Negativity is something that breeds negativity, and you eliminate negativity by facts and by truth and by feedback and by process and communication.
Well, let me give you the process right now. And if you're going to write a white paper, say, again, as a history student, you do. But it's what a manager do. First thing is you must accurately and concisely state the problem. What is the problem? Oh, the food's no good. That's not the problem. The problem is the French fries are soggy. Great. Then what are the facts? What's the temperature we fry them at? What's the machinery you have? The facts without prejudice. You gather all the facts. Then you have the principles after that. Because to analyze facts, you need principles. So the principle would be, people should have a French fry equal to McDonald's, where it's not soggy, it's nice and salty, whatever it might be. Then the next thing that you have to do is to document that. So now you've done the analysis, you draw a conclusion and you document, then you articulate, you distribute, then you listen for feedback, then you defend what you've done, and then you modify as necessary.
Exactly.
And that's a process that every manager should follow. So that's with the board, that's with the members, that's with the staff. Just follow that process and you got it. I love it. I go to boards all the time. Well, when I deal with boards, and I say, okay, I'm going to give you a category, and what's the issue? Well, board's a category. The issue is they don't know what's going on. Great. Now we can do something. The fact is that it's not communicated. Do they do this? No. Do they? It's easy if you use it. Then you draw a conclusion. Board should know what's going on. Now, I know a general manager of a very prestigious club. He's now retired, but he said, let me give my philosophy of leadership. I said, what's that? Keep him in the dark and feed him caca. It's like, what? And they think that's funny. I don't think that's funny. You see what I mean?
No, not at all. Not at all. But that's how many managers, though. I mean, and there's a reason why managers last less than 3 years in North America. I mean, it's and that's not a slight on managers. It's a comment, in my opinion, on the challenging role that running a club with 800 bosses you have to have the blood for it. You have to have the aptitude for it. You have to be passionate about conflict and about overcoming it.
Well, one of the things I like to say, I'd love to have a camera. I'd love to do one of those Saturday Night Live things, following the manager through the club. And I want to see how you articulate the things that we've talked about. The manager visits the ladies' bridge room, right? And so we go in there and they're all got gray hair and gloves on and the whole thing, and they're all shaking, and you go in and say, oh, good to see you ladies. And then one of the ladies looks at him and says, why did you raise the dues? Everybody in that room will give you the look. Can you convince those ladies that the decision was the right one? What was the problem? Dues are too high? Well, what are the facts? Every club in the area has dues 20% higher than ours. Okay, what is the principle? We want to make sure our dues are high enough to not only take care of operations, but to put aside money for the future, whatever it might be. That's it. I love to see, how does a manager respond in a case like that? And there are a lot of managers who are what I call office cats. They love to sit in their office. Oh, I'm doing paper. I say, dude, that's part of what you need to do. You do the paper so you know how to answer the questions in the lobby when people come in for lunch. Right?
Yeah. Awesome.
I'd love to follow them around with a camera. You and me, James,
I know.
Being invisible men. Oh, how do they respond to this one?
Well, it's a fascinating industry that we're in, Greg. And, you have imparted your wisdom, continue to impart your wisdom with Tribal Magic and with all of your, and as you said, you offered it. You've been so generous in sharing white papers and policies and templates and documents with anyone that asks. And I know at the end of this podcast, we'll tell everybody how they can reach you. But I want to thank you for being part of Golf Industry Guru again today, and look forward to having you on again. And there's so many different things that we can chat about that in this fascinating, wonderful world of club management. And it's an awesome journey, and it's a fascinating time these days, that's for sure. So great to have you on board.
James, it's absolutely great to be here. I mean, sorry about my phone just went off. Absolutely great to be here. And again, what you want in an old man like me is I want the buzz. And great conversation is the least expensive and most satisfying form of buzz in this world. So, James, thank you for having me on. And here's hoping Golf Guru feel that buzz as well.
Thanks, you bet. Thanks, Greg. All the best. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.